morning I want to try to wrap up this long section that we've been on, that we've entitled The Three Questions in Ethics. We've looked at a series of 3 questions. We've already gotten down to the last one. We've spent now several messages on it. And so probably in what will amount to be 2 messages this morning, I want to wrap up not only this 3rd question, but all 3 of them together combined. So the question that we're on concerns the standard for man's life, the standard for our decisions and for our morals and for our ethics. I have to remind you of that because we've talked so much about a couple of particular men, Fletcher more than Robinson, and about one particular answer, situation ethics, to this standard question, that you could easily forget why we're covering all of that. What's the question that we're on? Well, we're on the question, what's the standard or the basis by which, on which, through which we're all to make our decisions, our moral and ethical and everyday decisions in life. And so according to situation ethics, it's a standard of love, which we've shown you amounts to no more than the standard of selfish expediency. You do what's expedient in that situation, but you do it for selfish purposes. No one really is doing anything because they're concerned about someone else. It's always only because of yourself. Now, what I want to do this morning is start with the most outlandish and most memorable of Fletcher's examples. Now, if you've been here for the last few messages, you remember the whole horde of demonic examples that Fletcher's fertile imagination has been able to bring up, for the most part, here in his book, Situation Ethics, The New Morality. Now, I've shared this in part before, and I had to look it up to find out all the details. It's the most memorable of Fletcher's examples, and it comes from a true story. And it goes like this. Back toward the end of World War II, after the Allied forces had already landed in France and were pushing their way towards German territory, there was a month-long battle from December of 44 to January 45, which puts us right towards the end of World War II. That was and is referred to as the Battle of the Bulge. It came from a speech that Churchill had given, just like we're indebted to him for the phrase, the Iron Curtain. Well, so also the name of the Battle of the Bulge. It's a misnomer because he thought that the wrong forces were winning as compared to who really was winning at this time. But be that as it may, there was a small penetration or a small wedge that the Germans forced into the Allied lines, hence the term bulge, the Battle of the Bulge, in case anyone didn't know what the Battle of the Bulge was all about. And in the Battle of the Bulge, you've got the Allied forces on the Western Front. Germany is having to fight on 2 fronts, the Soviets on the Eastern and the Allied forces, the French, the American, the British, and so forth, on the Western Front. And on the Western Front, in the Battle of the Bulge, a German infantryman is captured by the Allied forces and sent away to another area. Now this leaves his wife, who now is a single mother, she has 3 children, all alone, all by herself, back in Germany. As a matter of fact, back in Berlin, who has no job and no income and no husband and no anything at this point. And so it leaves her to having to forage for food in order to provide for 3 children. And so one day while she's out foraging for food, not long after her husband had been captured and sent to another area, she's picked up by the Soviet patrol on the Eastern Front and sent to a prison camp. And right after this woman was sent to a prison camp, then she found out that her husband, through other inmates there in the prison camp, had been released from the camp that the Allies had sent him to. He had made his way back to Berlin. He had located their 3 small children, but no one knew the whereabouts of the wife or the mother. And so it caused great consternation in the family. There was great agony and a lot of sorrow. So the mother finds out about this, the mother and wife, who now is in a Soviet prison camp, finds out about this from other friends who've been able to get remarks into the prison camp through friends of theirs. And it causes great sorrow and agony for her because now she's causing all of these problems for her family back in Berlin. The husband's been released and he's back with the 3 children. And the laws of the Soviet prison camp, you have to understand, are such that there are only two causes for the release of a prisoner. Number one, if the prisoner contracted a bad illness, then they'd be taken to a hospital somewhere else in the Soviet Union, and hopefully on the way, or once you're there on the way back, you'd be able to escape. But the problem with this woman is she didn't have any bad illness. She wasn't sick. She was healthy. She had been out foraging for food, and she was healthy from doing that. So the only option she had was the second clause in the contract of whether you'd be kept or released. And that was that if a woman was found to be with child, then she'd be allowed to leave and return to Germany as a liability. And so since she's not ill, she only has one choice, assuming that she wants to get back home and relieve all of this anxiety and sorrow, tension and agony in her husband and 3 children. So she is able to coax, probably it wasn't that difficult, a friendly Soviet guard at the prison camp to impregnate her. Thus she was released and joyfully reunited with her family. And Fletcher calls this his famous example, and it's a true story, of sacrificial adultery. Now, do you remember some of the other ones that we've given you, whether we're talking about divorce, fornication, even murder? Remember the examples we gave of the women hiding their children when the Indians were coming by a near path or something? Even murder, bank robbery, just about anything can be done in a sacrificial way if it is supposed to help someone else. And so Fletcher calls this sacrificial adultery. In other words, it's justified. This type of adultery, sleeping with the Soviet prison guard, this friendly Soviet prison guard, would be acceptable. It would be justified because that's the only way she could get out of prison camp. She wasn't supposed to be there anyway. She wasn't fighting a war. She was simply out trying to find food for the 3 starving children. You see the complications that result. Well, that's not all of the complications, because another author picked up this true life account of sacrificial adultery from Fletcher and gave it the following conclusion, and I found it very interesting, so I jotted it down and brought it to share with you. After the woman has had the friendly Soviet guard impregnate her and she is allowed to go, she's free from the prison camp, she's 200 miles from home and it's the dead of winter. And she knows that her sacrificial adultery will be all in vain unless she's able to find food now. And you know what a Soviet winter can be like in the dead of winter. If she doesn't find food, this sacrificial adultery is no good. And by the way, let's assume for a moment that she died. Then what's going to happen in heaven or hell? Assuming that she goes to heaven, what's going to happen then? She committed sacrificial adultery, but it didn't bring about the result that she intended. So now what's going to happen to her? Well, that's not the way the story goes, but there's a little ending I could put to it. Mine just isn't as good as this one because it keeps on and on going. So she realizes she's going to die if she doesn't find any food. So as she's headed back the 200 miles, she finds a farmhouse. The friendly farmer, during the dead of winter, offers her all the food that she can eat if she will, you guessed it. So she has a good night's sleep. Her belly's full of food, and she's played some hanky-panky with the farmer on the side, and so she leaves the next morning, and she heads out and finds the nearest highway and begins to walk and walk and walk, dead of winter, 200 miles from home, and finally a trucker pulls up and asks her does she want to ride, and she said she would appreciate it, and he said he'd accommodate her if she would. You guessed it again. Finally at home, her husband's now dead, and she has no way to support her children. It's taking her so long to get home. She has no way to support them, except by now she has really refined the act of adultery. She's pretty good at it by now, so why not just go on into prostitution then? So the question would be, where do you place a period whenever you follow situation ethics? Where would you place a period in a case like that? It could just go on and on and on. Really? Sacrificial adultery the first time, does that mean you can do it twice with the farmer? Well, I guess so. If you did it once, you can do it twice. If it's allowed once, it's allowed twice. How about 3 times with the trucker now? Well, You can't stop now. You've got 2 strikes against you, or 2 in favor, they would say. So you might as well go and perfect your art and act now and keep on going. Now she gets back home and she's got no way to provide for the family. Her husband, something has happened to him and he's now dead. But she's so good at bed hopping, why not just go into prostitution now? And so in a roundabout way, what you can say when you carry their examples all the way out is that anything and everything is justified, including prostitution. Well, you wouldn't have to carry that story to its logical conclusion, because Fletcher as much as says that many times in his writings, that it doesn't matter what it is, if the situation demands it, then you're justified in whatever you do. From murder to lying to, I guess, blasphemy. Oh, how about this example, by the way? Oh, I know that this would be a famous one to use and a favorite one to use, and people have used it in the past, and I'll let you guess where they are today. You're a bold witness for Jesus. He's anointed you back in the, 2nd century A.D. He saved you and filled you with his Spirit or whatever. That would be their claims anyway. Anyway, you've got religion. I'll say that. They might say others. I'll say you've got religion. And you're warned by state authorities to either keep your religion down or maybe even go so far as to recant. And so what do? It's happened before. Well, in my heart, God knows what's in my heart. But if I say to them that I'm a Christian, then that'll kill my effective ministry, because they'll kill me. And God wouldn't want me to disappear, because then who would be left around to minister if I'm gone? And so that has happened with people in the past. You tell the truth in your heart, you're a Christian martyr, at least you're suspect, because they're fixing to take care of you right now. You're going that route. You are telling the truth in your heart, but you're telling a lie with your mouth to those people that are in front of you. It's just a doctrine of the Catholic Church. It's called mental reservation. That if you've got a mental reservation in your mind, you keep the truth reserved in your mind, then it's allowed for you to tell a lie to someone to their face, such as searching for the Jews during the time of Nazi Germany. In other words, you could cross your fingers behind your back and they say, do you have it in here? No. But are you really telling a lie? No, because your heart really means yes. Well, the only problem with that is that the Bible says, contrary to Catholic doctrine, that out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaketh. So whatever you're saying, that's you. That's a manifestation of you. And if it's a lie, that's a manifestation of the lying heart that you have, this tendency towards lying. And so it would be true in just about anything else. Well, in James 1, verses 14 to 15, we see that there's really no way and no place where you could put a period in Fletcher's example of sacrificial adultery, because one thing always leads to another, as we've shown you with another author's threefold conclusion to Fletcher's story of sacrificial adultery. Temptation leads to lust. Lust leads to sin, James said. And many times some type of sin will lead to some other type of sin. And finally, James said, and when it's all done and through with, then all of that leads to death. So when you open up yourself to a story, to an example like this, by disobeying, violating the Word of God, then there's only going to have to be one more occasion for you to take one more step that's in the wrong direction. You've got 2 more occasions, you'll probably take 2 more steps. In other words, as James sets forth there in James 1, 14 to 15, sin generally just produces more sin. You know, when you commit one sin, when you stole something, now you've got to lie about the fact that you didn't steal it. One sin always is going to lead to another type of sin. And so if you want to start off with sacrificial adultery, it'll probably lead into something else, probably lying and a lot of other things, and eventually it leads into another commission of sacrificial adultery, then another commission of sacrificial adultery, and then sacrificial prostitution is what you would end up with. Remember the example we gave you of the woman that he was speaking with flying on an airplane back to New York, of patriotic prostitution. It all depends on the situation. They can hire a young woman in a position like that, or this woman in Fletcher's example of sacrificial adultery, she's put in such straits that she only has one way to go, according to the situationist, and that is multiple sins, And when are you going to be justified? Which sin is going to justify another sin? What about the final sin that you commit? And what's going to justify that? Always something. They're trying to get something to justify something else. But as we're saying, the question in this whole business of situation ethics is, where do you place a period? To all of these examples, we could take any of them. Where do you place a period? So what if you hire the young, beautiful woman who's a shoe salesperson in Washington as a patriotic prostitute? What if that patriotic prostitution of hers eventually leads into a compromising situation where she's got to kill someone to keep him quiet? Well, of course, that would be justified. And what if, that's for your own government as opposed to another government, what if your own government turns bad? Well, Bonhoeffer tried to kill Adolf Hitler and got caught doing it, and he got executed, and he's looked upon down to this day as a Christian martyr. He's even referred to as that, as a Christian martyr. Generally, it's Bonhoeffer's and Watchman's Nee names go together. And there's really not any relationship. Watchman Nee was quite a bit different than the liberalism, the neo-orthodoxy beliefs, and the situational beliefs of Bonhoeffer. But of course, he carried his beliefs to the extreme. The situation demands, because our country's going under, that if Hitler doesn't have enough sense to see that he's losing the war, and if his generals don't have enough courage and his field marshals enough guts to tell him that he's losing the war, someone's going to have to kill Hitler. Bonhoeffer tried. Bonhoeffer didn't succeed. But Bonhoeffer today is referred to as a Christian martyr. He was martyred for the Christian faith, trying to get rid of Adolf Hitler. Well, Romans 13 says you're to obey the powers that be. And in Nazi Germany of that day, it just happened to be a man named Adolf Hitler. The point is, I'm saying, not only is that going to lead you into the commission of murder towards other governmental leaders in opposing nations, what if your own government turns bad? Then you're going to be out after the mayor, the governor, the president, or whomever. So let's come to, in conclusion, some problems with situation ethics. We spent a lot of time on this because it's so important. Now, I hope you haven't been confused in these studies that we've done in the 3 questions of ethics. There's a lot of give and take, a lot of backwards and forwards, but as we point out some of these problems with situation ethics, maybe that will narrow your beliefs down enough to keep them in line with the Word of God. In the first place, we can say that situation ethics inevitably opens up a Pandora's box of hypotheses and absurdities. In the sacrificial adultery account, at what point in that story did we reach absurdity? At what point? You think, all right, well, we can go with one sacrificial adultery. I don't know about this farmer business. And then you get to the trucker, and then you get to now she's going to be a prostitute the rest of her life. At what point in that story do you reach absurdity? Whenever you presume to give us situation ethics with its so-called alleged basis of love, whenever you give that to us for life standard, you just open up a Pandora's box of hypotheses. What about this? What about that? That's just a story that I gave you. What about this? Hypotheses as well as absurdities. At what point in that story did we reach absurdity? For that's absurd, committing sacrificial adultery over and over and over again. In other words, the way Fletcher wants to portray it is that if you just do one quick thing wrong like that, everything will be fine for you the rest of your life. You'll get back home to your husband, your children, the war will be over, everything will be fine. But life's not like that. Something else is going to happen sooner or later. That's what this other author has done, given us the benefit of developing that story to its logical conclusion. Because life isn't like that. If you just commit one wrong, then everything else will be okay. That's the way the devil tempts people. Just lie right here. If you just steal this, I know that you're bad off financially. If you just steal this, then get that need, that debt, that bill taken care of, everything will be okay from now on. No, it won't. James 1:14-15. One sin will lead to another sin, will lead to another sin, will lead to another sin, and all of that will lead to eternal death. That's just the way life is. You have to keep committing more sins to cover up your tracks from earlier sins. Just the way that it is. So I don't know where you'd reach. I don't know what Fletcher would say. Of course, Fletcher didn't carry the sacrificial adultery episode to its final conclusion. That's what I'm saying. He would just say, well, we've got this all taken care of. Just sleep with one friendly Soviet guard, and you've got this child now that you're going to have as a result of that adulterous relationship, but at least you'll get back home with your husband and with your children. But what about if we want to take that a step further? If we want to take all of these other examples that we've given you from Fletcher's writings, another step, another step, another step, then you end up with absurd hypotheses all the time. You have to keep trying to outguess yourself, outguess the situation. You have to keep trying to outguess the future. Let me give you another example of what takes place from, again, Fletcher's own writings of these hypotheses and these absurdities. He gives the case of a South Pole explorer, Captain such and such, who in trying to locate the South Pole and go along on his expedition, he ran into a little trouble making it back to the coast in time for them to get on board the ship and so forth. He has a little trouble getting back because they've got a man who was injured on this expedition. The only way to get him back to the boat is to carry him on a stretcher. But in the climate there at the South Pole, to carry this man on a stretcher is going to slow them down dangerously. And so what does the man do? The captain, that is, the one who's in control, the leader of this party in this expedition. Now remember the three approaches that we gave you from Fletcher to every situation. You're either an antinomian, you're a legalist, or you're a situationist. Well, what do you think should be done in a case like this? What would be the legalistic response? According to Fletcher's own definitions, his own examples that he's given. Well, the legalist, you can't let someone die. I mean, as a good Christian, I don't care what it costs. I don't care how dangerous it is. You can't let someone die. You've got to make sure you get that man back. That's what, according to all of Fletcher's examples, would be the legalistic choice. Well, do you know what he calls that? He calls the fact that the man went ahead and stayed with the stretcher-borne individual. They didn't abandon him, and as a result, the whole party perished in a blizzard there at the South Pole. And he said this was a good example of situation ethics. That's just contrary to his own examples, though. You see, how do you know which one, who is talking about? It's absurd hypotheses here. I mean, whenever I saw that, I thought, well, I know the answer to that. If you let that man stay there and die by himself, you'd be a legalist. You'd be a Christian legalist there. But, or if you took him with you, you'd be the legalist. If all of you are going to try to make it out of there together, well, that's pretty dumb, because all of you are going to die like that. Now you're going to be in all types of trouble. But you never can find out, well, which really would be the situationist response and which really would be the legalistic response here. As a matter of fact, I remember that there was a true story one time, just to show you how even the situationist can get in trouble in the future. They try to make it seem as though nothing ever goes wrong for them. There was a case one time where a ship in the North Atlantic was taking on too much water. There was too much weight on the boat. It had a storm at sea. The captain just didn't know what to do. So logically, they first of all began to throw out all of the tackling and all of the goods and all of the extra material that they could find on board. But there was still too much weight on the ship. It was still sitting too low in the water. So the captain says, what I'm going to do is ask for volunteers, suicidal volunteers, who will jump overboard. We need some people to jump overboard. I mean, it was a ship full of people. We need some people to jump overboard to lessen the weight on the ship and thus at least save some of the lives here. Well, again, you'd be hard-pressed to answer, is that a legalist decision or a situationist? Because as soon as you answer it, Fletcher gives you one of these things and turns it around. Well, no one volunteered. And so the captain said, well, he talked to his big burly first mate and said, start pitching some of them over. Pitch the heaviest one first. So the first mate began grabbing some people and throwing them overboard, and it got about halfway through, and that seemed to be enough off the boat so that it wasn't sitting too low in the water and they were able to weather out the storm. Well, next day or next few days or so, they finally made it to the place where they were headed after the storm had shifted them and moved them around. Lo and behold, there was a surprise waiting for the ship and the captain and the first mate there. All the people who had been thrown overboard were there on land. They didn't know it, but in the confusion of the fog and the storm, they were right next to a dock. They threw everyone overboard, and those people happened to swim in the right direction, all the same direction, climbed up on the dock, and during the next night and the next day, the storm kept brewing, and it blew them out away from the land, the ship, and finally the ship made it back there. Well, the end of that story, a true story, is that all those people, you see, that would be according to Fletcher, it would be just a guess, he probably would trick us, that would be the situationist thing to do. You've got to get rid of some people in order to save others. The legalists would let's just all die together. We can't ask anyone to commit suicide. The end of that story, to show you the problem that a situationist can get himself into, is that those people all pressed charges against the first mate and the captain and had them accused and then had them indicted and then had them jailed for attempted murder because they threw them overboard. That's what happens to a situationist there. That's a true story. That really did happen. Threw them overboard and they were convicted and thrown in jail for attempted murder. So I don't know. Anyway, Fletcher in this example of the South Pole says we can't always guess the future even though we're always being forced to try. Well, you see, that's the whole point here. You never can guess the future about these things. How do you know that ship is really going to sink with all those people on board? How do you know that? You don't know the future. Remember the examples we gave of the two women who had a baby crying when the Indians were supposed to come by, and one of them killed the baby in order to save the whole party, and one of them let the baby live, and the whole party died as a result of that? Well, whenever you are in that situation, not reading a history textbook, looking back on it, you don't know what the future holds. Maybe your baby is going to stop crying just the instant before the Indians get there, and you killed the baby too soon. Maybe a bear is going to come out of the woods and charge the Indians, and they're going to be so caught up in that they'll never hear the baby cry. Maybe they're after some white lightning from the white men, and they're coming looking for you. They're trying to find you to get something from you. Maybe it's mutiny from the teepee, and they're wanting to go over to the white man's side. You never know. Maybe they want to get converted and get religion. You never know what they're coming out there for. Maybe there's going to be an earthquake right before they get there, and that path they're walking on, they fall down in a hole in the ground then. And you killed your child before they got there. You see, Fletcher's right here. He said, we can't guess the future. That's the point. That's the point. In situation ethics, you may do something that's going to prove detrimental in the future because you didn't know what the future was going to be. No one knows the future, you see, but God. And they don't believe in God. They just believe in man and man's humanistic conception of the man upstairs, the greater, higher spirit and being. So you all have to do what the situation demands based on expediency. But the thing is, what's expedient right now, the future may prove to have been not very expedient after all. A person's life is gone. You already defiled yourself. You fornicated. You're an adulteress now. It's already too late. You can't reverse things like that. What's expedient now, the future might show to be not so expedient after all. Well, there's even a more complicated example. We're talking about the Pandora's box of hypotheses and absurdities. Here's a GI who, after he returned from Vietnam, had some type of terrible digestive disease where he couldn't hold his food down and his stomach was all upset, and it wasn't just that. He said he went the Tums route for a while, and that didn't do any good. And they checked for ulcers and couldn't find that. It was something in the digestive tract, and it was something serious. As a matter of fact, they only gave him 3 years to live after he checked into the local VA. And in order to stay alive those 3 years, they gave him pills that cost $40 every 3 days for these pills. Now that's, what, about $100 a week? $400 a month just for the pills to stay alive. This is a true account. So he met Fletcher. Should have met me or you or someone else. But he got a family, a wife and children, and he's spending $400 a month now just on pills, and even that's not going to do him any good after 3 years. They say he'll be dead in 3 years. So here's his Pandora's box of absurdities, hypotheses. Here's his situation. He says to Fletcher, he said, you know what's really bugging me? He said, the company, he's an engineer, works building roads and bridges and so forth. The company has me insured for $100,000, double indemnity. That's all the insurance that I have. Whenever I'm gone, that's all that I have to leave to my wife and the children. Now you listen to this. If I take the pills and live past next October, then the policy comes up for renewal then, and undoubtedly it'll be canceled. They'll check into his health before they renew that policy and find out he's going to be dead in a few years, so we're not going to renew your policy. So he said, if I take the pills and I live past next October, they're going to cancel my policy when it comes up for renewal. If I don't take the pills, then at least my family will have some security, because then he'll die and it's $100,000 double indemnity, which is a clause in an life insurance policy that they'll pay double if it's an accidental death. He says, if I kill myself, then they'll even get more, because it's a suicide case, and that's what the clause in the life insurance policy said.
For the continuation of this
because then he'll die and it's $100,000 double indemnity, which is a clause in an life insurance policy that they'll pay double if it's an accidental death. He says, if I kill myself, then they'll even get more, because it's a suicide case, and that's what the clause in the life insurance policy said. He said, if I take the pills and then borrow the money for them, that is for the pills, he doesn't have enough for $400 a month for the pills. If I take the pills and borrow the money for them, and then the policy lapses when it comes up for renewal next October, then not only will my family have no insurance, but now they'll be in debt for the money that I borrowed in order to pay for the pills. He says, but if I don't take the pills, then it seems to me as though I'm killing myself, just as if I committed suicide with a razor or gas or something else. Well, see, he didn't know what to do there. What do you do? I mean, what would you do? Let's say that you're not saved. What would you do in a situation like that? That your policy is going to be gone here next October. That is, if you keep on going the way you're going, if you stay alive, if you commit suicide now, then you've killed yourself, but your family's going to get not only double indemnity, they're going to get more because of the suicide clause in the life insurance policy. But who knows whether or not maybe some radical transformation will happen in the body, a new drug discovered, new surgical procedures would be discovered within the next 3 years, so that not only do you not need the pills, but you won't need the life insurance to take care of them, because you're not going to die, at least for a while. You're stuck with a Pandora's box of hypotheses and absurdities. There's no end. He said, I don't know what to do. If he doesn't take the pills, then he's going to die, he says. I'll die without the pills. But he said, is that really the same as just going ahead and killing myself with a razor or gas? He said, that's suicide. Where's my family going to get the most, and what can I get out of all of it? I don't see how anybody's going to get anything out of a situation like that. You're stuck. The only one who has any hope would be his wife and the children. Hopefully he'll commit suicide, and they'll get not only this $100,000, but they'll get a lot more besides that. Well, cases like that, similar ones anyway, like this one that I just mentioned here, maybe not all the other ones, but this one I just mentioned, cases like this happen all the time. How are you going to get by? You can't lie, or you can try, but they'll check you out very well when you're a 65-year-old man, you drink, you smoke, and so forth, before they give you good life insurance coverage. They'll be checking you out pretty good. What are you going to do about some diseases that you have? How are you really going to have enough to take care of your family without paying an arm and a leg in premiums right now? Well, the point is, it doesn't matter which direction you go in. It's a Pandora's box. As soon as you open up situation ethics, you open yourself up to hypotheses and absurdities to which there's no end and no solution. I mean, I couldn't even think of a solution except kill yourself, but that's not a solution, though. That's really not a solution to this. The solution is, how can he be okay, his wife be okay, his children be okay, everybody be okay. That's what life is about. We want to continue living. There's no solution. There's no answer to that. Well, another problem with situation ethics. Fletcher, according to his own writings, as well as the other situationists, and we wouldn't have to be told this, we'd know it anyway, rejects the need of personal salvation. He rejects the need of personal salvation, which means he doesn't forget, he doesn't even know that man, as a sinner, can't love talking about love, 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 situation ethics is based on love, you can't love until you're a Christian. And you can't become a Christian until you recognize that you're a sinner and you obtain personal salvation. But Fletcher says all this business about Adam and Eve and Jesus, the fall, the cross, resurrection, he said all that is a myth in the Bible. Here's a quote right from his own book, or a paraphrase anyway. Fletcher says that a lot of people think that there one day in the past was a literal, quote, fall, F-A-L-L, unquote. He said people that believe in this literal fall abound in church circles. In other words, he's deriding that. Anyone that believes there was a literal serpent, a literal first couple, Adam and Eve, that we didn't evolve, a literal fruit that they ate of, a literal tree that the fruit came from, a literal God that gave them commandments and so forth. He said there are a lot of people that think that there are such things as these literal things in the Bible, and he said they abound in church circles. So that shows right away what his belief is concerning salvation, concerning sin. Well, sin doesn't exist because he said adultery's okay, which the Bible says is sin. So sin wouldn't exist except, according to Fletcher, whenever you act out of love. But what about this woman in the case of sacrificial adultery? The basis for all of this business, remember, dear friends, is love. You do everything out of love. Well, didn't this woman act selfishly towards this Soviet guard? What if her adultery with him ruins his marriage when his wife finds out about that? We're back to the first problem, absurdities and hypotheses that end up. You see, again, Fletcher, he gives you all these good examples, and people, Christians, multitudes of them, hear this, they read this, it comes from the pulpit all the time, they just soak it up like there's no other way out besides this way. And they never see what about some of these other conclusions to these same illustrations they're giving us. She was acting out of love toward her husband and toward her children, but what about toward the Soviet guard? What about toward his wife? What about toward his children? Wasn't she pretty selfish in getting her to commit adultery with her? Well, certainly she was selfish. What about the case of the rainmaker? Remember the case of the rainmaker, one of the two heroes of Fletcher's book, where this rainmaker travels around. He went down to a ranch in Texas, and he sleeps with the old rancher's daughter to restore her sense of womanliness to her, to give her hope of marriage and children and so forth in the future. And the rancher's son, Noah, runs out waving a gun. I'm going to kill that rancher for seducing my little sister. And the old wise rancher, according to Fletcher, stops him and says, Noah, says, you're so full of what's right, you can't see what's good. But what about, you see, that story sounds good. The rainmaker comes, he seduces the girl, and she grows up into a woman. What if, when he leaves, she's worse than when he came? What if now she has so many feelings of guilt? Maybe she becomes demon-possessed over this whole situation here. Maybe she's worse. Maybe he hasn't helped the situation out at all, but he's hurt her and hurt the situation. Well, who acted in love? I don't see the rainmaker acting in love. He acted in lust, but he didn't act in love, though. You see, Fletcher, only thing he wants you to be able to see, he tells the story. And since he gets to be the storyteller, you're supposed to just listen to his story and don't think on your own. And isn't that what the church out there is all about? They talk to us like we're dummies, like we don't think ourselves. They just tell us things that we're supposed to do and believe, and like we don't have a brain ourselves. He tells you the story. The only thing you're supposed to think of is that poor, lonely girl. She probably got freckles and a wart on her nose, and she'll never get married, never have any children. No one loves her. She doesn't even know what the birds and the bees are all about, and she's 32 years old now. Oh, the rainmaker loves her so much. He wants her to grow up and be a woman and be married and have children. Well, you see, that's all that you get from Fletcher's story. You don't think of the psychological consequences that woman could experience after the rainmaker leaves. Maybe she falls in love with the rainmaker. Maybe that's who she wants to marry. Maybe it's him that she wants to have as the father of her children. And he's taught her all about it. Now he leaves. Well, she's going to be in double trouble as compared to whenever he first came. So there again, you see that as you take it to some conclusions, not only do you end up with hypotheses and absurdities, but you end up with selfishness. You end up with really no love in that situation after all. It sounded good and it looked like love if you only listen to their story and their account. But as you take it a little further, then you find out that maybe the individuals could end up worse. Something else that Fletcher has to say in his book, page 51, is that both the Christian and the non-Christian alike have the Holy Spirit and are therefore able and capable of love. Listen to this. He says the Christian situationist says to the non-Christian situationist, who is also his neighbor, your love, my dear neighbor, is just like mine. This is a Christian talking to a non-Christian. Your love is just like mine. It's just like everybody else's love. It is the Holy Spirit. Love is not the work of the Holy Spirit. It is the Holy Spirit working in us. God is love. He doesn't merely have it or give it. He gives himself to all men. He gives his love to all men, to all sorts, to all conditions, to believers and unbelievers, high and low, dark and pale, learned and ignorant, Marxists and Christians. Well, see, he's got no conception of Christ, salvation, personal sin. He said we've all. Because the problem you'd end up with, and of course Fletcher realized this, is that situation ethics would only work for a Christian, only work for someone who has the love of the Holy Spirit. Well, according to my Bible, Galatians 5:22, love is a fruit of the Holy Spirit, and you take that along with John chapter 14, verses 16 and 17, we read from Jesus' own lips that the Holy Spirit's not given to this world. It's only given to his disciples. And if that's true, it means that the world couldn't possibly practice situation ethics because it doesn't have any love. The very reason this has been dreamed up is so that we can all just mingle and mix together. And you'll see the hippies carrying their little placards saying, down with Christ and up with Marx. Well, that's exactly what Fletcher is saying here. That the Holy Spirit and love are given to Christians and to Marxists alike. John 14:16, you might want to notice. Now I will pray the Father. This just doesn't even read like the God of Fletcher and his situation ethics. I will pray the Father, and he will give you another comforter, that he may abide with you forever. Now Fletcher says here on page 51 that the non-Christian's love is the same as the Christian's love because it all comes from the Holy Spirit. Well, I'll call your attention to the 17th verse. Even the Spirit of truth, whom the world cannot receive. Well, that solves it for a believer. The world cannot receive the Spirit. It's not just that they don't want to, and that's true, it's that they can't. He's not given to the world. Because it seeth him not, neither knoweth him. They don't know anything spiritual. But ye know him, for he dwelleth with you, and he shall be in you. Of course, he's talking about the Acts 2 baptism of the Holy Spirit. So, to follow, in other words, Fletcher's situation ethics would be to follow universalism, to follow liberalism, and to follow modernism. That everybody's saved, that is, quote unquote, what does saved mean? I mean, after all, again, you see the hippies carrying their signs, Jesus saves. Then underneath it in parentheses is the phrase green stamps. And so what do you mean by the terminology that you use? So we're all, in other words, we're not really saved because there was never a fall, which means we were never lost. We're all men. We're all brothers. We're all brothers and sisters. That's what the hippie movement was all about. And we're talking, remember, about an 80-year-old man who's got all this stuff in publication today, not someone who's out there in the hippie movement himself. Well, let's go on to another problem. First place, we said extreme hypotheses of absurdity. Second place, you're opting for universalism. Everybody's saved, nobody saves, all one. We're all part of the universal spirit. There never was a fall, never was a literal Son of God, resurrection, virgin birth, inspiration of scriptures, or anything. Fletcher doesn't believe in personal salvation, doesn't believe in Christianity, in other words. But he was a professor of Christian social ethics, so it shows you what you get in some of the religious schools around today. Thirdly, it just follows from the 2 points we've already made that, alarmingly enough, situation ethics offers total freedom to every man's mind. Total freedom. So that man becomes a god to himself. You're a god to yourself in every situation. In every situation, what you would do if it's done in love, doesn't matter what anyone else would do or would say about that, is done correctly, and you're in the right because it's been done in love. Judges 21:25 would be a good verse for that. There's no king in the church today. Not in the church out there in the world. But every man does that which is right in his own eyes. Judges 21:25. There wasn't a king in Israel, and I think we're in the same situation today. There's no king in the church. If Jesus existed as king in the church, they'd look to him and his will and his word in making their decisions and not to their own understanding. So there's no king in the church today. Every man does that which is right in his own eyes. If sacrificial adultery is okay for you, then it's okay for this situation. In the fourth place, another problem with situation ethics is that it clearly rejects obedience to all Christian guidelines by passing them off as legalisms. Remember, anyone who goes to the code book of the Bible and tries to find a verse for his problem or his question or his need would be dubbed by Fletcher and his comrades a legalist, because he's going by some rule book. So Fletcher just passes off, rejects, repudiates all obedience to Christian guidelines because these are legalisms. But you see, the Bible never sets forth that the commandments of God are legalisms or that obedience to the commandments of God are legalisms. A legalism is an improper attitude toward the commandments of God shown in the way that a person acts toward them. That's what a legalism is, boiled down to the final ingredients. A legalism is an improper attitude toward the law, an improper attitude. You see, the Pharisees were legalists not because they were trying to obey the Bible. They had an improper attitude about that. They were just trying to bind everybody all the time, and they took their thrills and joys out of binding everybody by this little law and that little law and that little law. In other words, there was no love in the situation. There was no love in a person's obedience. And therefore, that's what the Bible refers to as legalism. That's what we have reference to when we speak of legalism or when we speak of someone being a legalist. But according to Fletcher, we would be legalists because we try to use the Bible. But if you use the Bible with the proper attitude, that's called obedience. If you use the Bible with an improper attitude, that's called legalism. We've taught you that in various ways before. You can approach various requirements, prayer, fasting, witnessing, or whatever. You can approach those in two different ways. You can approach them obediently or legalistically. And in both cases, you're going to do them. I mean, the odds are, if you're obedient, you'll pray. If you're legalistic, you'll pray. But one's acceptable and one's not. The whole Scriptures speak of this, but particularly the New Testament speak of the difference between obedience and legalism. Generally, you're going to find the people doing the same thing. But one's going to be held guilty, and the other will be praised for what he did. Because one came out of obedience that's generated by gratitude and by an attitude of love, and of course the other, it's nothing but a legalism for them. So he just rejects all of these guidelines. He said, we don't need these guidelines that the Bible gives us, all of these various commandments. He said all we need is love. But you see, that would be like playing a game of sports, football, basketball. That'd be like playing sports with the one guideline of fair play, or with the one guideline of sportsmanlike conduct, because that's what love is all about. Now, how far do you think a football game would get with the one guideline, the one principle of fair play? Fair play, well, what's fair play, though? You see, fair play, that has to be worked into all the minutiae of the rules of professional football. You've got to have rules, how many downs you get, how many yards you have to go, how many men you can have out there. Fair play, well, fair to me today is 100 versus 2. 100 on my team, 2 on your team. You want fair play, and we say you want love. But it's love, it's fair play, in other words, that's the undergirding of all of these commandments, whether in the Word of God or in professional basketball. You've got to have all those laws. But you don't want to just have those laws and not have fair play. We could really say then you're being legalistic about it. You're out there doing this and doing that, but you won't shake an opponent's hand. Help him up whenever he falls on the ground. Everybody likes to see fair play and sportsmanlike conduct. But you don't want to see that without any rules, and you've got what we call a free-for-all. It's just everybody for himself, and we just all get in there. We try to be fair, but what's fair? You've got to define fair by the laws that are used, by the regulations. That's the only way you can find out what fair play is. How would you know what's unfair if there were no rules in basketball? You don't ever have to put the ball to the court. Just take off running with the ball. Is that fair? Well, I guess so, because no law tells me that it's not fair. What they mean, of course, by fair play is be kind toward everyone. Well, you can have your love. That's fine. It's required, as a matter of fact. But that doesn't mean that you can substitute love for the commandments of God. Love is to be the undergirding, the support, the foundation, the groundwork of the commandments of God. That's why Paul can say in Galatians 5 that the summing up of the law is love. He didn't say that love repudiates the law, love rejects the law. He didn't say that love is a substitution for the law. It's the summing up of the law. You've got to still hold to the moral and ethical requirements in the law, in the Word of God. But love is the undergirding structure, the foundation of all of this. And the same is true if you're talking about sports, you're talking about anything where just life tells us this. When you're in business, when you drive a car, you can't say I'm going to drive by fair play. You have to drive according to certain laws and regulations. He's not recognizing that all of life is like this. It's not just these legalistic Christian church members that he has reference to whenever you carry his statements to their final result. He's trying to portray it like that, by these legalistic Christians. Well, I doubt he runs stop signs all the time just because there's no one there. Fair play, there's no one here. I'll take this stop sign today. He probably stops. Legalistic, you're obeying the laws. Well, it's exactly what he's doing. He's obeying the laws. Hopefully, of course, you would obey them in the right spirit, or it's not going to do you any good, or you won't be very satisfied whenever you are doing it. So just like all sports have a multitude of regulations, but they're supposed to be governed by fair play, such is love to be in the Christian's obedience to the Word of God. It's to be the groundwork, the foundation for the Christian's obedience to the Word of God. Fletcher, we're still under this fourth problem here. Fletcher said, this is a very interesting way to describe it, although it's a misapplication of the rejecting of the guidelines because they're just there to help us in certain situations anyway. He said that really these rules, laws, guidelines, principles, he says it doesn't matter what you call them, they're all really principles and guidelines. These passages and texts and verses that we have in the Word of God, he said really that's no different than punting on fourth down or taking the 3-0 pitch. Now, do you know enough about football and baseball? Some of the women don't, so I need to explain. Well, in football, you get 3 downs to make a certain amount of yardage, 10 yards. You get 3 downs. On the 4th down, you have to punt. But do you always have to punt? No. You can refuse to every single time. Now, if you don't make the yardage, you're in trouble because the other team takes over. In other words, what is this guideline, this principle of punting on 4th down? All that is a suggestion that in most cases it'll work best for you and your team if you'll punt on 4th down. Now he's comparing that to the Word of God. In most cases, adultery would be wrong. In most cases, it'd be wrong. But there are times when you're desperate. You know, whenever you're losing by a few points and you are the losing team and you've got the ball on your own 10-yard line and it's fourth down, there's no sense in punting. You've got maybe a minute left on the clock. There's no sense in punting. Only a fool would punt then. You're going to go. Maybe you've got 2 yards to go. Maybe you have 50 yards to go for first down. The wise thing to do is what? Neglect that punt on fourth down rule. Just neglect that because it's only there to help you along in the situation, in the game. It's only there as a guideline. Neglect that. Go ahead and go for the down, and maybe you'll get it. Maybe you won't. Same thing is true in baseball. One of the first things you're told whenever you're up to bat by your manager or whoever you learn baseball from is you always take the 3-0 pitch. But do you necessarily always take the 3-0 pitch? You see, if you're out ahead of that pitcher 3-0, the odds are, since he's already thrown 3 balls in a row, he'll probably throw a 4th one. The odds are in your favor. So don't dare swing, because what if you swing, pop fly to center field, they catch the ball, you didn't have any strikes, you were 3 ahead of the pitcher, but now you're out because you made a foolish mistake of swinging when you shouldn't have swung. So they use this example, that in baseball it's only smart to take the 3-0 pitch because he's already thrown 3 in a row. You've got 3 more chances. 3 more chances he's going to throw another ball. All he's got to do is hit a ball in 3 more chances, and he'll walk you to first base. And what happens if you take that pitch? Well, you may get out. Well, that's a general principle in baseball. If you're ahead of the pitcher 3-0, you don't swing. How many of you have played baseball? You're pretty quiet. You know that's true? Yeah. You don't swing when you're ahead of the pitcher 3-0. That's dumb. But what if you're Babe Ruth, though? I mean, Babe Ruth, if you know anything about his life, you studied something about his life, he's not the world's greatest baseball player in history. Ted Williams was a much better hitter than Babe Ruth. But how many, maybe, of the women in here have ever heard of Ted Williams as compared to how many women in here have heard of Babe Ruth? Everybody knows Babe Ruth. Why? He wasn't just a home run hitter. He was such a showman. He'd let himself get in a hole like that and then belt one right out of the park. You remember people like that as opposed to a Ted Williams that just hit about, 4,200 or so balls. That's way beyond Babe Ruth. But you don't remember someone like that. Well, the point is that in certain situations, you don't go 3-0. You see, this would be contrary to what Fletcher says here. In certain situations, maybe you've got this Babe Ruth up there to bat. And he goes ahead and takes the 3 balls, and it'd be foolish to swing when it's not time to swing. Go ahead and take 2 more, at least get it full count. And then that really makes it melodramatic. But it makes it look that much more foolish whenever you're so far ahead and you just point to the center field wall and go ahead and belt one on out there. In other words, there's a time where you break it. Well, the problem with this analogy is that the analogy of the punting on 4th down and the taking of the 3-0 pitch and comparing that with the guidelines in the Bible, that is a guideline of strategy. That is a play of strategy in sports. We're not talking about strategy in Christianity. We're talking about obedience to the Word of God. If we're talking about strategy, then you can maneuver things to get yourself in such a position where maybe you do have to disobey the Word of God once or twice or 3 times in order to have something better come as a result of that. So punting on 4th down, taking the 3-0 pitch, it sounds like a good analogy, but that merely regards strategy in the games of football and baseball. It has nothing to do with either obeying or not obeying these, what Fletcher calls guidelines, as they are set forth in the Bible, as they are set forth in the Word of God.